You're listening to Fanfiction Factory, the show that takes you to parts unknown with familiar faces and familiar places. And now he's the 57th President of the United States of America, Draco from Gatorbox.
That's right, number 57. Mark your calendars, because whenever that date rolls around, whenever that election rolls around, it's going to be me on the ballot. You guys are going to vote for me. You just don't know it yet. We're not going to make America great again. We're going to make America halfway decent again. Let's start from there. Let's use that as a springboard into making it great again. We got to get to halfway decent first. We got a lot of shit to fix. So, let's focus on that, and then we'll worry about the bigger picture. But anyways, that's Nintendolt, everybody. Nintendolt, thank you for the intro. I appreciate it. Welcome to Fanfiction Factory. I am Draco from Gatorbox, and in today's episode, we're going to be reading a creepypasta. So, usually creepypasta is its own thing separate from fanfiction, but I feel like there's enough similarities there that it can pass as one, especially considering that this creepypasta was posted on a fanfiction website. So, the author is steadfast in saying, yes, this is a fanfiction, and it's in the correct categories. It's in, all that stuff. So I figure let's dance with danger and read ourselves a creepypasta. Now, those of you who aren't familiar with what the term creepypasta means, it is essentially a spooky story, usually revolving around lost video games or lost episodes of TV shows or memories of things that aren't quite correct. And then it turns out that, Sonic.exe is one of the best examples of that, which has kind of become a joke in the, mainstream internet. Everyone knows about Sonic.exe, where Sonic's eyes are black and he's got red irises or red pupils or whatever. And he basically torments and tortures the other characters in the game by challenging them to try to run away from him. It's really kind of silly that people take these things that are usually intended for younger audiences and turn them into like nightmarish creations. So I would like to dive into some creepypasta in this week's podcast. So the one I've chosen is The Lost Episode of Wile E. Coyote. This was published on September 25th, 2012. And just a heads up, I'm going to say right now, we're also going to be reading its sequel story that was posted separately in this same episode. So there's two parts to this, and we're going to start with the first one. Here we go. I was out on a walk one afternoon. I was going down to my local pharmacy store to read some magazines and maybe buy a snack. Yet on my way there, I noticed a garage sale. I don't normally care about things like that, yet I figured I could spare a minute or two and look around. Who knows, might find something cool. As fate would have it, I did. I noticed an old Looney Tunes DVD. The case was rather old and worn. Some of the characters' faces seemed to have been ripped off, probably from some little kid or something. I used to love those things as a kid, and I especially loved Wile E. Coyote. Plus it said it had a special Lost Episode. Lost Episode, I thought. Never heard anything about one of those. Yet when I tried to buy it, the owner said, "You don't want that DVD, dude." "Why not?" I asked. "The Lost Episode is..." He stopped talking, as if in a trance, haunted by some horrible nightmare. I didn't really care. I mean, if it's bad, so be it. Still got plenty of other episodes to watch on it. In the end, I bought from the guy anyway. He shook his head and frowned as I left. Geez, I said to myself, how bad can it really be? Later that night, I decided to watch the DVD. The rest of my family had gone to bed already. My bro and sis had to go to school early tomorrow. My mom had a tough day at work and basically crashed on her bed when she got home, and my dad goes to work at 5 a.m. So it was just me, myself, and I watching some good old Looney Tunes. I put it in the player, and soon enough the main screen came up with all the options. Looked cute enough. It had Bug in the center munching a carrot, Wile E. and Roadrunner in the background on one side, and Sylvester and Tweet on the other. Occasionally Daffy popped up every once in a while, trying to get on screen. Yet when he finally does, Elmer Fudd shoots him with his gun. I noticed the Lost Episode had a section just for itself, and I remembered how freaked out the guy was. Curious, I selected it. How terrible can it be, I remember thinking once again. The episode starts off as normally, the WB sign zooming up, followed by that little do-do-do-do-do music. Then the title of the episode pops up. I Got Them All. I found that title a bit odd, but whatever. The title fades away, and I was shown Wile E. Coyote, yet he wasn't running after the Roadrunner. In fact, I didn't even hear a meet meet. All those goofy scientific Latin names they put under he and Wile E. didn't pop up, yet the most unusual thing was it was nighttime in the desert. No Wile E. Coyote cartoon was ever shown with it being night. Wile E. just stood there, looking at the camera with a really sad and serious look on his face. No music plays. There's an orange glow coming from the left of him, and I could hear what sounds like fire near him off screen. He just stood there, looking at the camera, looking at me, for about 15 seconds. Then he turned his head near the off-screen fire. The camera stays on him so I can't tell what he's looking at. He looks back at me, then holds up a sign that reads, "You laughed at me." I didn't get where this was going. Then he talks. Rarely does Wile E. ever talk unless he's with Bugs Bunny. "You all said it couldn't be done," Wile E. says. "That I can't catch him. That destiny dictates that it shall not be." I lifted an eyebrow, still wondering where this was going. Wile E. walks off screen, and when he's totally gone I hear something wet and squishy along with the fire. Wile E. walks back and looks at me once more, then lifts his hand. I gasped at what was in it. The Roadrunner's head! Wile E. laughs and proceeds to bite into the bird's decapitated skull. As he does, the scene flashes to Wile E. silhouetted by a full moon as he runs through the desert night. Back to Wile E. and Roadrunner's head for a moment, then back to Wile E., still only a shadowed outline of him. Then I see the Roadrunner sleeping in a nest. Wile E. walks toward him. Back to Wile E., who'd taken another bite of the Roadrunner's head, blood dripping out of it. Back to Coyote creeping to the nest. He now stands right behind the sleeping bird. I'm now seeing Wile E.'s feet. Blood drips down near them as the sound of him eating the head is heard. Again we return to Wile E. and the nest. Wile E. now holds what looks like a large knife. "No way," I remember saying just before it happened. Wile E. jams the knife right into the Roadrunner's head, its blade coming out the front and piercing one of his eyes. For a brief moment the Roadrunner twitches. Then his body goes limp. Wile E. pulls the knife out by ripping it out the top of Roadrunner's head, followed by chopping of his neck. It returns to Wile E. and the head. He's still looking at me. He tosses the head away and smiles. I was make a freaked out face, terrified and surprised at what I just saw. "Surprised, I see," Coyote said. "Well, what about this?" Wile E. reaches for the side of the screen and moves the camera over to where the fire is, only to reveal the rest of the Looney Tune character's head on poles. He walks over to the first one, Porky Pig. Just then the scene goes to an image of Porky body on the floor, being cut open, and his internal organs being ripped out by Wile E.'s hands. Next is Sylvester. All we see in his scene is his decapitated head and toilet, floating in the blood water in it. Elmer Fudd, only his hat is on the pole. The scene goes to him with his shotgun in his mouth, then his head exploding in a bloody, brainy mess is what I assume was Wile E. firing it. Sam, shot with his pistols. Foghorn, skinned alive. The dog. Does that dog in those Foghorn cartoons have a name? Chainsawed to bits. I felt like wanting to vomit with each new character introduced, followed by how they died. Soon enough he came to Bugs. Bugs still had his whole body, yet he was impaled upon a much larger pole, his body still twitching, its tip coming out of his mouth. The camera moves to the side of his head. His eyes move to look at me. He tries to mutter something, yet can't. Wile E. then gets a knife and cuts one of Bugs' ears off. "Please, no more," I managed to say. I don't know how I made it this far without turning it off. "You want me to stop, eh?" Wile E. said. That sent shivers down my spine. Could he hear me? Could he see me? Wile E. goes in to stab Bugs in the bottom of his spine, then lead the blade up to his neck. Blood gushes out of the new wound. I couldn't take it. I stopped the DVD, took it out, and broke it. "Stay lost, you fucked shit," I said as tossed it away. I didn't watch Looney Tunes for 2 months after I saw that. I was too afraid that episode would appear. I still am. I tried looking it up on YouTube, yet that, and no site for that matter, has it. I just pray nobody else has a copy of this DVD. Don't watch the lost episode. The end. So that's the end of the first story. Like I said, there is a sequel story, and you can kind of see this hits on all of the tropes of a creepypasta. It actually opens with going to a garage sale, which, you know, the main character, the narrator, is sidetracked into going to just because they go there on a whim, and then that's where they find the cursed item, and the owner says, "Oh, you don't really want that. I don't know how that got in there." And but the narrator insists on buying the item because they really want it, and manage to talk the seller into selling it to them. usually the seller is unhappy about it. Basically, this was published in 2012. And this is hot off the heels of the popular Ben Drowned creepypasta, which was about the Legend of Zelda Majora's Mask. And that creepypasta opens with shot for shot almost the exact same way. Narrator is going to some place, gets sidetracked by a garage sale, finds the quote-unquote haunted copy of Legend of Zelda Majora's Mask at the garage sale, buys it, takes it home, and then freaky things start to happen. So you can tell that this author was inspired by Ben Drowned, at least in terms of the opening. And then, the pacing kind of changes up because this is Looney Tunes. It's not the Legend of Zelda. And, the author went for a more gorier approach to, to presenting his story. So, I read that. It was hard reading that story because the author has some grammatical errors in his writing. So, trying to read that the way it's written, there were a lot of you could probably hear a lot of jump cuts in the audio for this episode because I try to read these stories as they are presented, and that includes grammatical errors as well as spelling errors. So that was the first installment of this story. Let's check the reviews of it, see if there's anything that people are saying about it. The first comment says, "Holy monkey, this was creepy. Great story, but creepy." There's another comment saying, "Wow, dude, you're awesome. Blood and gore and Looney Tunes specifically is just something I love. Is that strange? Anyways, I wish that episode was real." Yes, anonymous commenter, that is strange. There's another comment saying, "It was a really nice and creative pasta, but it was cliched near the end. Overall, I give it an 8.5 out of 10. Even for the cliche, still get an 8.5. Damn. Guess the bar is really set low. Here's another comment that says, "WTF, I'm really frightened by the story. I hope this DVD does not exist too. It isn't real, thank God." And finally, the last comment is, "Screw you, Wile E. Coyote. You are worse than Jeff the Killer." Jeff the Killer being another popular creepypasta based upon a heavily photoshopped image of somebody that looks kind of like the Joker with his scars that go up and it makes his smile look creepy, except this is photoshopped so that the exposure is all blown out and you can only see like these beady eyes and a big smile. That's Jeff the Killer. You could Google that and then you'll find it. You'll find plenty of creepypastas written about Jeff the Killer. We might feature one on the show someday. It's just a matter of finding one. So, like I said, there's a lot of traction on these creepypastas, because creepypasta for a while was a very popular genre of writing online, made popular by things like Sonic.exe and Ben Drowned, and some of the other things we've talked about. Candle Cove is another one. So this was back when that was a hot commodity. So let's move on to the second story in this creepypasta of whatever the inverse of a trilogy is, a trilogy minus one, finishing the lost episode of Wile E. And then the description just reads, "A sequel to my lost episode of Wile E. Coyote creepypasta." Now, this one was published about 2 years later on February 6th, 2014. So it took the author a couple of years to come around and write a sequel. But he did, and here we go. Everyone remembers the Looney Tunes, Bugs Bunny, Daffy Duck, Porky Pig, and all their pals doing the zany, funny stuff we've come to know and love. Or at least, that's what I used to believe. I had heard about things like this before, these lost episodes. I didn't believe in them at first. I mean, what kind of psycho would make an episode from My Little Pony where the main characters get raped and murdered? Okay, we just went from 0 to 100. Or make Squidward and SpongeBob SquarePants kill themselves. And don't get me started on the one about Ed, Edd, and Eddy. To me, they were just creepy stories told over the web, just people out to get a good scare. Yet all that changed when I met this guy, Tony. Tony and I used to work at the local movie theater where we lived. Not the greatest place in the world, I'll admit, but hey, free movies. Anyway, this one day while on break, I told Tony about another Chucky movie that was in the works. You know, that old 80s film about the killer trapped inside a doll's body? Well, when I told Tony about it, he just said, "Dude, I've seen stuff far more terrifying than Chucky." At first, I thought we were going to get into a horror movie nerd dispute, arguing who was the best scary villain. Yet instead of rambling on about Freddy, Jason, and Jigsaw, Tony told me about this DVD he got at a garage sale, a Looney Tunes DVD. At first I chuckled. Looney Tunes? You got scared by a kid's cartoon, man? Wimp, I remembered saying. But then Tony told me about the lost episode it contained, and how Wile E. Coyote brutally murdered most of the Looney Tune characters. I shrugged it all off, though. I knew Tony sometimes smoked. I'd seen him puffing sometimes in the back of the theater, so I figured he'd probably just had a bad trip while watching some TV. Still, though, something about how he said it disturbed me, how vividly he could describe it all like he did. If he'd been tripping, parts of the experience would have been blurry, right? After a bit, I just decided to drop it and get back to work. 2 weeks had passed since Tony and I had that conversation. I had the day off and decided to go to the mall for fun. Who knows? Might even buy something neat. Most of the stores were either places to get clothes or food, had a few small toy stores, even an arcade and a pet store full of puppies. Yet, then I walked past the video store. As I did, I remembered what Tony had told me about the Looney Tunes DVD. I can't really explain why, but I went into the store. Perhaps part of me wanted to call Tony on his bluff, to get and prove the Joker wrong, or maybe I was just really curious as to if such a horror distortions of cute films really existed. Again, I can't say what came over me. I started to rummage around the shelves of old kids' movies, Popeye, Tom and Jerry, Johnny Bravo, Dexter's Lab, and finally Looney Tunes. I tried to think back to which one Tony said it was, yet then I remembered he said the cover was worn and ripped. He probably never saw the title of it. Thanks for nothing, Tony, I thought, going to leave. Yet as I was about to go, something caught my attention in the corner of my eye. On one of the lower shelves was an old DVD Looney Tunes DVD. The cover looked faded, but it wasn't damaged in any way. The title read Looney Tunes Greatest Hits 2, yet the part at the bottom caught my attention the most. Contains a special lost episode. No way, I said. I flipped it over to see if it showed a small pic about the lost episode. It just showed a picture of one of the tunes, Wile E. Coyote. I can't tell you how shocked I was just then. I was holding it, the very monster of a film that had spooked Tony. You gonna buy that? A store clerk said, coming over. I wanted to put it down, to let it go and move on, but I had to know. I had to see it with my own eyes, to know if such vile creations truly existed in this world as Tony and the other online people had said. It was 11 o'clock at night now. My family was asleep besides me, but I didn't want to run the risk of any of them seeing whatever gruesome events unfolded once I popped this in the player. The menu screen came up with all the options. I was surprised when I saw it was different from what Tony had said. In the DVD he saw, it had Bugs in the center munching on a carrot, Wile E. and Roadrunner in the background on one side, and Sylvester and Tweet on the other. Occasionally Daffy popped up every once in a while, trying to get on the screen, yet when he finally does, Elmer Fudd shoots him with his gun. This one, on the other hand, had almost none of those characters on the screen. Instead, it showed Granny on one side with Tweety in a cage. On the other side, it had Marvin and Gossamer, the big red hairy monster with shoes. Occasionally, Speedy ran past the screen, leaving a small trail of dust and chanting his trademark phrase. Yet in the middle, there he was, Wile E. Coyote. Nothing seemed weird about him. He was just smirking like the super genius he claimed he was. Yet his eyes, they were red, and they looked so real, like someone had photoshopped a pair of bloodshot eyes on him. Also, I swore I saw them moving as I picked up the remote and scrolled through the options. Soon enough, I came to the lost episodes section. Well, Tony got through it okay, so I should be able to as well, I remembered saying. I hit play. The episode starts off normally, the WB sign zooming up, followed by that little iconic music. Then the episode comes up in red letters behind a black background. You didn't let me finish. I didn't understand what that title meant at first. The screen went black and I was shown Wile E. in the desert. Everything Tony had told me began to show itself on the screen. It was nighttime in the desert. Many Toons' heads were impaled on poles, except for the Roadrunner's head, which lay on the ground a half-eaten mess, and Bugs Bunny, whose whole body was impaled on a larger pole, a fresh wound on his back as Wile E. had apparently slid a knife into him. Wile E. turns his head and looks at the screen. At me. He then walks over to it and stares. I just looked back dumbfounded, surprised that every Tony had told was true after all. Wile E. spoke. Well, you're definitely not the last guy who watched this episode. I suddenly remembered that Tony said he never finished the episode when he watched it. Yet how could someone make a film and know that? What dark powers were unfolding before my eyes? I wanted to turn it off, yet as I reached for the remote, Wile E. held up a sign that read, "Don't even think about it." I gasped. Wile E. could see me? I really hated not getting my business done before. Please don't be as inconsiderate as the person before. I knew he was talking about Tony. I wanted to curse at my coworker, yet I didn't blame him for pulling out the DVD. It was only the start of what Wiley did. How much worse could it get? Wiley went back to Bugs and dug his hands in the big cut he made in Bugs. What he did next was a book right out of Mortal Kombat. He tore out Bugs' spine, the bunny making a quick gag before going limp once the coyote had the whole thing out. Wiley raised the spine in victory and I thought it was over. Just killed the poster boy for Looney Tunes. Who was left? Yet it didn't end. I guess you didn't hear. I got them all. Wiley reached for a side of the screen and moves the camera. I was now witness to all the other tunes that were on the menu screen and a few lesser-known ones. Like Tony said, most of their heads were on poles, except Tweety, Speedy, Chicken Hawk, and the two Gopher brothers, Mac and Tosh. They're in a small cage. As I look on, I saw Speedy was dead, his skin pale and vacant of color. A scene then cuts to a clip of Speedy running around some Mexican village, only to then stop as some aroma fills his nostrils. The mouse looks over to see a block of cheese on a plate. He quickly runs over to it and eats it quick, cartoonish style. Yet once he's done, he throws up, followed by coughing up blood, then falling down dead. Wiley then walks over and picks up the mouse, followed by holding up a bottle of cyanide. It went to all the dead Looney Tunes, and I was shown a dead Tweety. The scene cut once again, and I'm shown that horrible fate befell the bird, which was having his neck snapped as Wiley turned the little bird's head around like it was the cap on a soda bottle. Then he pulled the whole head off the bird's body. Back to Wiley in the dark desert, who proceeds to reach into the small cage and toss out Speedy. I now see that Chicken Hawk, Mac, and Toss are still alive, yet they wouldn't be for long as Wiley tilted the cage and sent the Gophers, Bird, and Dead Bird into his gaping maw, where he proceeded to munch on them, blood oozing out of his mouth as he chewed on their bodies like they were grapes. He swallows and rubs his gut as he goes to the first head on a pole. It's Granny. In her flashback, I had to endure watching Wiley cut into her with a hacksaw as she was strapped onto an operating table, blood and guts flying all over the place. It was a miracle I didn't toss my cookies just then. Next was Marvin. He had his head cut off and his eyes gorged out, followed by the coyote using it as a bowling ball. Taz, shot to death with a sniper rifle. Gossamer the monster, simply lit on fire with a match. Pepe Le Pew and Penelope the cat. Wiley tied the skunk to a chair and slit his wrist as Wiley violated the feline of his dreams, followed by stabbing her. Pete the Puma, a lesser-known tune, beat to death with a metal baseball bat. Witch Leza, that green-skinned witch in the blue dress, stabbed in the heart like a vampire. The turtle that beats bugs and races, turned into soup. Marvin's dog, Canine, tail ripped off and jammed through his eyelids like some type of socket floss. I wanted to turn it off as Wiley kept going on showing more tunes and how they died, yet that warning he gave me, if I did so, would he just torment someone else who saw these DVDs? Perhaps that was the source of their power. You had to finish the lost episode in the first one, or it'll get passed on to another DVD. If I stopped it now, who's to say there's not a third part in this DVD series? Would I be cursing some other unfortunate soul to watch Wiley and his madness, as Tony had unknowingly done to me? After all, who would stay and watch all this unspeakable horror? So I kept watching. Eventually, Wiley got to Lola Bunny. "You got guts, I'll give you that," Wiley said to me. "But now it's time for the finale." That coyote walks over to a table with a cloth over it. He removes and I see Lola Bunny bound and gagged upon it. She's alive still. "This is it," I said to myself. "Finish the film. Beat the DVD. Bring it on, you unholy hellhound." "Hey, Tony." "Oh, hi, Brad. Say, have you seen Jim? I thought he worked today. I wanted to give him back the uniform shirt I borrowed." "Didn't you hear, man? Jim's dead." "What?" "Yeah, parents found his body in the living all mangled and tore up, like an animal got to him. Strange thing was the cops found no signs of any forced entry, plus his folks didn't own any pets. Yet the oddest part was they found him holding a Looney Tunes DVD. Tony? You okay? Tony?" Never watch the lost episode. The end. So, this one was kind of hard to follow because I wasn't sure if the narrator was, I guess his name is Jim. I wasn't sure if the narrator was the same person as the one who watched the creepypasta in the first one. I'm assuming that was Tony who watched it, because Tony described it and then he clearly just stopped the DVD, but that doesn't explain how it made it to a video store. It just arrived there. So I don't know if all of the Looney Tunes DVDs are linked and there's some psychic dark power that connects them all. I don't know how it works. The author, as I've read these, you can tell the author is not the most skilled writer, with some of my mispronunciations and repeating words and stopping and starting in kind of jarring manners. I think Tony is the narrator from the first story, and Tony is telling his friend at work, Jim, who's the narrator of this second story, about the creepy Looney Tunes DVD he saw. And then Jim is at the mall, he gets distracted, he goes into the video store, he finds the DVD, he rents or buys I think he buys the DVD is what he said, because the clerk said, "Are you going to buy that?" So he buys the DVD, he brings it home, and his viewing experience picked up where Tony's left off, and Wile E. Coyote notices that it's a different person watching, so he just continues on from where he left off, I guess. I've got to say, this one was a little gorier. You can tell that the author cranked up the horror porn, I guess, if you want to call it that. Especially because he gets into Wiley violating Penelope the cat, and I feel that's kind of extreme. Thankfully, the story cuts off with Lola Bunny tied to the table, and he doesn't go into what he does there. That's left up to the reader's imagination, but I'm glad that this particular author didn't write about what happened, because I have a feeling it would probably be inappropriate for this show, just because the previous parts of the story kind of hinted to the fact that he's willing to, quote unquote, go there. So let's check the comments for this second part of the story. Let's see what the Peanut Gallery thought.
Here's a comment. Okay, it crazy Wiley talk to anyone throw the TV, but this is impossible. Good creepypasta, and now why he kill them, and then he will be alone. Dumb move there. So there's someone trying to inject some logic, saying now Wiley's going to be all alone in the Looney Tunes universe because he killed everybody. But clearly he's capable of escaping from the television, so he's probably out in the real world now. Here's a comment that just says horrible. That's quick and to the point. Here's somebody trying to get someone. This is really common in the comment section of some fanfics, are people trying to get authors to write things that they want to see, almost like people begging for free artwork from artists. So this guy leaves a comment saying, "I dare you to make a creepypasta with, I double dog dare you to write in Scott Pilgrim as the hero, I triple dog dare you to set the whole thing in the Move Frozen universe." So Scott Pilgrim in the Frozen universe. Creepypasta. Figure out how that works. I'm not going to think about it. So here's something really weird. It looks like there's a bunch of guest comments on this that all came from the same person, because they read in chronological order, all posted on the same day. If it was me, I would talk to Coyote and ask him why he killed Bugs Bunny and all the others. The next comment reads, "I wonder what would happen if someone talked to Wile E. Coyote and helped him with his problem." The third comment says, Wile E. Coyote could have someone to talk to when he had a problem. The next comment says, "I wonder what would happen if someone summoned his or her courage and tried to talk to Wile E. Coyote." Then the final comment says, "Maybe the curse could be broken by someone who was brave enough to talk to Wile E. Coyote." For some reason, that is spread out across 5 comments. And then finally, we end on a comment that just says, "Bad. Fuck it." Again, quick and to the point. So there's people in the comments that are dogging on this author pretty bad, and that's kind of inappropriate. I don't like to encourage people who to go do things like that, just because this is somebody despite their lack of ability and their strengths with the English language. This is somebody who's putting themselves out there, right? This is someone who's thought of an idea, who's thought of a story, who actually, took the time to write that story and post it online, which is a lot more than can be said for a lot of people who just go around giving others trouble. So even if it's wasted talent, if it's perceived as wasted time because the story is no good, there was still an effort, some measure that was put into this. So I always kind of look down upon people who leave flame comments like that, but they are funny to read. I will admit they are kind of funny. They do make me chuckle.
But that's it for this creepypasta episode of Fanfiction Factory. That's the lost episode of Wile E. Coyote, both stories 1 and 2 back to back. I checked to see if perhaps the author made a third one with one of the other people from at the end of the story, watching the DVD or whatever. But no, this story ends at this, I guess, chapter. It's hard to call it a chapter. It's just a sequel story, but it could very well just be a second chapter. So I feel like we're just splitting hairs here, kind of like what Wile E. Coyote did. Splitting hairs, huh? You get it? You get it? So, my opinions of this story is that it's very by the numbers creepypasta. It follows in a lot of the tropes of Ben Drowned, and basically then just goes into like horror porn or gore porn, whatever you want to call it. And it's just shocking for the sake of potentially being shocking. Somebody trying to write grimdark, try-hard fan fiction about Looney Tunes. So that is the reason why it's on this show, is because somebody took Looney Tunes, something so innocent and goofy, and tried to twist it and mangle it into some bizarre creepypasta where Wile E. Coyote goes on a maniacal killing spree and puts everyone's heads on pikes and slices Bugs Bunny open while he's still alive. That's the reason why we picked this one, obviously, just because of how absurd it is. I still appreciate the time that the author put into it. Like I said, this is, like I said, somebody putting their head out there, putting their neck on the chopping block and trying to share these things. Plus, this author's written a ton of other stories, so maybe they've gotten better as they've refined their craft. Maybe this is one of their older works. Like I said, this was 2012 and 2014 when these came out. So maybe they've gotten better if they've kept up at it. I hope they've gotten better. So you never know. You never know. Everybody's got to start somewhere. I mean, we read my story in episode 1. So like I said, everyone's got to start somewhere. So that's going to do it for Fanfiction Factory this week. Or I guess I should be saying, I keep saying this week, but we're semi-weekly. So I should be saying that's going to do it for Fanfiction Factory this fortnight. So join us again 2 weeks from now when the next episode goes up. I've been your host, Draco from Gatorbox, and I am signing off.
Fanfiction Factory is a production of Gator Company. To support the podcast, please visit patreon.com/Gatorbox to make a pledge today. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you in the next journey.